Hey, hello, YouTube. Welcome back to Pre on a Plane with me, Pretty. Thank you for joining our channel again. Like this video, subscribe so we grow. Today I'm speaking about something very exciting. I'm talking to new travelers. If you've never been on an international trip, this video is for you. So I'm going to be sharing tips, things that you need to think about for your first international trip. So let's get right into it. Okay, so like I said, this video is for new travelers or people who haven't really done international trips. So I'm going to share with you the things that you need to think about, what is really important, and what will make your first international trip a success. The first thing you need to think about is, do you have a passport? Before you even think about, I'm going on an international trip, do you have a passport? Is your passport valid? So go right now, go look at your passport and check when the expiry date is, because a lot of the places will not allow you into the country if your passport is not valid for longer than 6 months from the date of travel. So you need to make sure that your passport is valid. One, it's valid for the time you want to travel, and two, it's valid for longer than 6 months for when you are planning to travel. So if you don't have a passport, actually go get a passport. Right now, if you're in South Africa, you don't have to always go to the Home Affairs to go get passports. There are banks that actually help you with this. So just check online which banks have a facility for you to actually do or renew your passport and get your passport. So that's the first thing. The second thing you need to consider is, where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? This will be driven by a couple of things. It will be driven by your budget. How much capability do you have to save realistically? How much do you have to save? How much are you able to save? How much are you able to afford? So choosing a place is driven by different factor of things, like things that you are also interested in, but I'll get into that a bit later. But think of a place that is within your range. This can either be on your bucket list or driven by affordability. So if affordability is not a factor in your budget, then think about your bucket list. Where is a place that you've always wanted to go to and have just never gotten the opportunity to do it? So think about that. So that is the second thing. Find a place. The third thing is, you need to find out about visa requirements. Do you require a visa for going there as a South African? If you're from most parts of Europe, or you're from North America, Canada, the US, you probably don't have to worry about a lot of places that require visas, because your passport is strong and you can go to a lot more places. But if you're coming from South Africa and a lot of other African countries, you need to think about the visa. Check out my video on visas, applying for visas. Yes, think about visa requirements. Research visa requirements. What do you need to get a visa? Do you need to get a visa for going to that destination? And that is something that you also need to factor into your budget, which I'll speak about as the last thing, but you need to factor that in as well. So think about visa requirements. The next thing you need to think about is vaccinations. I'm not just talking about COVID. I mean, if you are vaccinated for COVID, great, because then you don't have limitations in terms of travel. But outside of COVID, there's other vaccinations that you need to think about. There's some parts of Africa and Asia where you need to think about malaria. Do you need malaria shots? Do you need to take malaria medication? That's one of the things you need to consider. Yellow fever is in some parts of Africa as well. So just think about vaccinations that you might need. This is also things that you need money for as well. So you take that into consideration, but do your research about the place that you're going to, the country that you want to go into. Do you need vaccinations for it? Next thing is, look at flights. Look at flights around that area. Around the area and around the time that you want to go to, because now you've chosen a country that you want to go to. You've looked at your passport, you've looked at vaccinations, look at flights around that time. How much are you looking at for flights? How long will flights take you? Are there flights available? Are there direct flights? Will you need to have multiple stops in between? So research flights. Do a lot of research, because flights are most likely going to be your biggest cost wherever you fly to, wherever place you go to. So just bear that in mind. So the longer you give yourself, the longer you give yourself to plan the trip, the less you will spend on flights. Flights are very unpredictable. So I say the sweet spot is 3 months to when you're planning to travel for you to start booking flights. So yeah, have a look at flights and have a rough idea of what you are in for in terms of finance of the flight, timing of the flight, and your general expectation. So yeah, that's the next thing. Look at flights. The next thing is think about, what do you like to do? Are you a party person? Do you want to go clubbing, drinking, bar hopping? Are you a history person? Are you fascinated by history of places? Are you into museums and art galleries? Are you into historical tours? Are you a laid back person? Do you just want to chill when you're at a place? Do you just want to chill at the beach and do nothing? Or do you just want to, take it easy and have a laid back approach to it? So what do you like to do? That also factors into the country that you will choose, and not just country, but the city that you choose when you go into the country. For example, if you're going to go to the US, huge country, you can't just say, I'm going to visit America. America feels like a continent. So it might depend on what your interests are. If you're into the party life, you're into the party scene, and, think about maybe going to Vegas, California, Nevada, California might be, more of where you want to go. If you're into the beach life and you want to be laying on the beach more, but you still like a bit of partying, think Florida, Miami. If you are into more historical, cultural aspect of it, think Massachusetts. If you are into glitz and glam, you're into fashion, into, history still, think New York. If you're into politics, you're into the arts, think Washington, D.C. So there's different things that you need to consider depending on what your interests are. If you like the natures and nature walks and all that, you're into that, think about places where you can go hiking, where you can do water sports, where you can do kayaking, where you can do zip lining, paragliding, those type of things. So think about the activities that you would like to do and factor that into where you want to go. The type of person you are and what you like to be filters into the next one, your accommodation. This is going to be your next biggest expense other than the flat. Your accommodation will be determined by what you like to do. If you're a very laid back person who you know that you need your 8-hour sleep regardless of whether you're on holiday or not, then your accommodation will be something more high end because you'd like to get more of a comfortable hotel where you can spend a lot of your time in. But if you are a person who knows that you're hardly going to be in the room, you're hardly going to be sleeping, then maybe a hostel is a better option for you, where yes, you can still have a comfortable bed, you can still sleep there, but you're not going to be spending a lot of time in that accommodation space. So you need to think about the type of traveler you are will factor into your accommodation. So you need to then start looking at accommodations, start looking at what type of accommodation you want to do. Then start researching the accommodation in the country that you've chosen, the city that you've chosen. One thing you need to make sure, this is the next thing. One thing you need to make sure you understand, when you're booking your flights, when you're booking your accommodation, is the different time zones. This is particularly important for when you're going to arrive. Understand the time zone that you're going to be landing. You also need to think about jet lag. How do you go about beating jet lag when you're over there? I can make a video about that and how I beat it, but you need to take into consideration that once time zones have shifted, when you get to a certain place, you're going to be in a completely different time zone, and you need to adjust your time to that. You need to adjust. A lot of the phones do an auto adjustment once you're in the area, but just make sure you are on the correct time zone when you land in a specific place. So yeah, that's the next thing you need to think about, time zones. The next thing is you need to do your research. Read travel blogs, watch travel vlogs, watch my channel, watch YouTube channels about travel, and get as much information as you can about the place that you want to go to, because then that will allow you to know that, is this the place for me? This will give you information about what to do over there, what can you do over there, or if you know somebody who's been to the place where you've been to, give them a call, text them, ask them about what they did when they were there, what they liked, what they didn't like, and that will get you a lot more prepared for being in a foreign country. The next thing you need to take into consideration is the weather. If you're coming from the southern hemisphere and you're going north, or you're coming from northern hemisphere and you're going south, you need to consider that the weather patterns are on opposite ends. You might leave South Africa in the dead set of summer and it's scorching hot, and you get to the north. If you're going to the northern hemisphere, you get to, for instance, you get to the UK and it is cold because it's winter. So you need to know the weather for the time that you're planning to travel. Take into consideration that the weather is not going to be what it is when you leave. Don't be wearing clothes that you are not able to layer on when you get to a new place, or take off when you get to a new place. So you need to take into the consideration that the flight you take, when you take your flight and when you land, will be completely different weather conditions. Well, this is of course considering that you will be going into a different continent. If you're in the same continent, roughly might just be the same, but it's always a good idea to know the weather patterns. It might be the rainy season where you're going, and you want to make sure that you don't visit a place during heavy rain season, because you might not even get to see the place. Well, unless it's Scotland and it's raining all the time and it doesn't matter about rainy season. But yeah, so you need to make sure that you know the weather, you understand the weather patterns for where you're going. So check out the weather. There's the weather, like there's apps such as AccuWeather. You can, look up the weather patterns for that place. Or you can join a subreddit for that travel and then find out from people who've been to those specific countries and see what the weather patterns are at the time when you're planning to travel. So check out the weather. Checking out the weather is not just, knowing when you're getting there. It's also allowing you to pack properly, because when you know the type of weather that you're going into, you know what to pack for the weather, what to wear for the weather. I'll make a video about clothes for different seasons and different weather patterns at some point. And then the last thing you need to definitely do, once you know where you want to go, whether you need a passport, what type of accommodation you're going to be looking at, then plan your budget. I know a lot of people do it the other way around, where they say, look at your budget and then decide where you want to go. But I think that is limiting you. Think of where you want to go, look at places where you want to stay, what type of person you are, then plan your budget, and then you can plan the timing of it and save up towards it. I feel like you can't budget for what you don't know. You can't just say, oh, I want to travel. I have 20,000 rands and then I just want to travel. Unless you are open to just doing anything and going anywhere, which is not the case for a lot of people. You need to know the country that you're most going to be comfortable and you're going to enjoy your experience. So now that you've decided where I want to go, how much I want to do, what I want to do, where I want to stay, then sit down and plan your budget. I am in finance, so I'm an Excel girl. I will literally take an Excel document and put it down and be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I want to do it. Then sit down and plan your trip and budget. Put down your budget and know that this is the place I want to go and this is how much I'm going to need for it. And these are the excursions. This is what I want to eat. This is where I want to eat. This is what I want to do when I'm there. This is where I want to stay. This is when I will sleep. So plan your budget now that you know what destination, your final destination you want it to be. Yeah, so that brings me to the end of things you need to consider when you're traveling. Just take this into consideration when you're planning your first international trip. The most likely you would want to not make it a very expensive trip. So places that you need to take into consideration, unless you have you don't have budget constraints. When you're planning a trip, then you need to think about, where do you want to go? Places that you are likely to go to will be in Asia. So countries in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, So those are places that you can go to that are not too expensive, and they can be within a reachable budget. Also, other countries to consider are Eastern Europe countries. You have your Macedonia, Croatia, Romania, Turkey. Those are places that are really great to travel to. There's so much to do and they are affordable. Also in Africa, come to South Africa. South Africa, Lesotho, very tiny countries. If you're doing South Africa, you might as well do Lesotho, Swaziland. Those are enclaves in the country and they're easy to travel to when you're in South Africa, and you can get your stamps. Think of Mozambique, Zambia, Botswana, or East Africa, Tanzania, Zanzibar, amazing. One of my favorite destinations in the world. So think of countries that are affordable and they can be easy for you to get to. And factor into mind the fact that language barrier might exist and will probably exist everywhere. So you need to be very open-minded for your first international trip. So I'd say, so that it's not too much of a culture shock, which is always going to be there, but so that it's not too much of a strain, just look for countries where they speak English. Go to countries where they speak English, especially for your first trip, and especially if you're going to be doing it solo. You know what? If you're planning a trip and you're planning it with a group of people, the likelihood is that not everyone in the group is going to end up coming, and you need to face the fact that you might end up doing it solo. So you need to just be prepared for that as well. You might end up being the two of you or just it being you who's traveling. So get ready for your international trip. The world is open. Get to budgeting, get to saving, and book those flights, and let's get traveling. Thank you for joining Pretty on a Plane once more. Remember to like this video if you like this type of content. Subscribe to the channel so we grow, and share this video with other people who want to travel or who have a desire to travel, who want to travel and see the world, who want to go abroad. Share it with them. Thank you for joining Pretty on a Plane. Love it.